All right, next up we have Dan Welch. Dan has worked as a writer of journalism, technical documentation, and computer code, but has been writing fiction, or actually writing fiction has been his goal since elementary school. Last summer, Immortal Works accepted his novel Death and Seven for publication. Dan says, episodes of the original Charlie's Angels TV show included a brief clip of a man at a typewriter, presumably Stephen J. Cannell, hammering around away at about 60 words a minute. About halfway through Death and Seven, I started to have periods like that of my own, and I knew what I wanted to say. I knew how I wanted to say it, and the words came as fast as I could type. It was exhilarating, and I want to do that again, and I totally agree. Come on up, Dan.
I'm just going to start with chapter 1. Amanda Wilson was not actively religious nor given to superstition. She did not consult with angels, believe in UFO abductions, nor consider herself reincarnated. Neither, however, was she unaffected by the talking dead. The corpse was propped up in a bed 10 feet away, was slightly green and vaguely smelling. Amanda had not initially recognized the electronically generated monotone she heard as speech. It took her a moment to associate the corpse with the voice. Then I thought, fattest fatty, whom shed. The voice trailed off. Dr. Kenny Conklin monitored the flickering lights and gauges of the equipment wired to the corpse, while Dr. Greg Ellerby, posed at a microphone, conducted the apparent interrogation. They were unaware that Amanda, struggling to control herself, was crouching in the dimly lit doorway of the laboratory. Want me to jolt him? Asked Conklin, a small round man with long dark hair and a full beard. He made Amanda think of some forest creature in a lab coat. Not just yet, said Dr. Ellerby. He leaned forward in his chair, keyed the microphone at his desk, and asked, "What did Mrs. Russell say on that Friday you had breakfast with her?" There was no movement of the corpse or animation in the dead man's face, but the voice resumed. "See come out for it, Album?" That seemed to please Ellerby. He made some notes and then asked a follow-up question. At breakfast that Friday, did Mrs. Russell say how she knew the report would not be released until the following Monday? When the corpse didn't answer, Kenny Conklin said, "Come on, Greg, we need to keep this moving." Ellerby repeated the question. When the corpse didn't answer, he nodded, and Kenny hit a switch. Sparks flew from the machinery, and electricity cracked and popped. A twisted, pathetic moan came from the dead man. Amanda cried out in sympathy. Startled, Greg and Kenny got to their feet and rounded on her. She straightened up, holding her hands instinctively in front of her, moving backwards slowly. "I'm sorry," she said, "I'm sorry. It was open." She bent down and picked up a large foam dart from the floor. This was stuck in the door, keeping it open. "I need to talk to one of you." Greg and Kenny stopped moving forward. "I need a signature on for the second heart-lung unit," she continued, "a signature for the requisition." That was true. She was the office admin, the entire office administrative staff, in fact, including receptionists, in the small lobby where she spent her days behind her orderly desk, almost totally undisturbed. "The mail pickup comes just before lunch. I wanted to get it out today." Greg Ellerby, who was tall and smiled easily, who Amanda thought was cute as opposed to his creepy little friend, Dr. Conklin, shrugged his shoulders. "Yes." He motioned to his right toward the end of the room with the chairs and a smartboard. "We're talking about your role here. Do you have time to chat a bit?" Amanda had loads of time. She had loads of time to mull over her decision to leave Washington for a job at this VA research facility in upstate New York, her brief marriage, which had gone so listlessly and expensively wrong, and the drab expanse of the rest of her young life stretching before her. But having loads of free time was not information he shared with the boss. She looked at her watch and made something of a small pout with her small neat mouth, and okay. Greg Ellerby spread his arms to encompass the rooms. "I guess this all looks pretty weird to you." Amanda said it certainly did. "It's all legal," said Kenny. "It's legal, but it's secret, really secret." "I have a very good security clearance," said Amanda. Greg nodded. The problem is this is an investigation, and some of the people we're investigating are inside government. They have good security clearances too. He paused before continuing. Normally, he said, with his eyes locked on hers, in a situation like this, you would be detained. Amanda understood the subtle threat, but smiled reflexively. Greg continued. Kenny and I have been talking about working something out with you. We really do need help, and including you in our operation back here is a pretty easy way to get some. We know you now. You're obviously competent and conscientious, and you do have a very good security clearance. Amanda looked over Greg's shoulder at the corpse. The dead man, a Caucasian and a senior citizen, nude at least to the waist and greener than she had first realized, had restraints on his wrists. We have, Greg said, Dr. Conklin and I, we have a little medical device company, Glimmer Development, and we've been working on artificial cranial nerves. He waited a moment, smiled again, and then continued. Most nerves go down the front spinal column from the brain, but the cranial nerves handle stuff that's inside your head, like seeing and hearing. Amanda nodded. Implanting the nerves is very sensitive surgery. We had some cadavers to work with. They were powered. What's powered? Asked Amanda warily. The nerves, he said. They have tiny fuel cells in them. I don't remember. The brain runs on very low currents, but we didn't realize how low. Even our tiny currents were too high, and when we put them into the dead brain, they started causing reactions. When she made no sign, he went on. It's like when you start your car, it doesn't start. The starter motor is turning the engine over, and a lot of stuff in the engine is working. The cylinders are going up and down, the valves are opening and closing, the spark plugs are firing, but the engine's not really running. When Amanda still made no sign, Greg smiled. We discovered that we could interrogate the corpse, said Kenny. The bones and membranes in the ear still work, so it's input signal. And we run that down one of our artificial nerves. That pumps electricity into the brain. We have an artificial voice box on the output nerves, and we use a heart-lung machine in a port for liquid nutrition. Kenny paused, looking at Amanda. Apparently satisfied, he continues. There are no psychological defense mechanisms in the dead person. The corpse will tell you anything you want to know. It's like accessing a database. Greg interrupted. One guy we got was a government employee, a crooked government employee. We got all this detailed information about various shenanigans. We were about broke, and since the stuff involved government fraud, we submitted it to a whistleblower program. We started getting paid. Then a couple of guys from the whistleblower program came around, wondering what our sources were, and given that they were federal investigators and we had a fresh corpse in the lab, we explained. They came back about a week and made us a deal. This man, he said, indicating the corpse, was Norbert Wycliffe. He was executed for treason. He's dead, but his head is still full of information. Information about financial fraud and criminal manipulation of the markets. A couple of pennies dropped for Amanda. The effort to clean up Wall Street had pretty amazing results, since financial malfeasance at institutions considered too big to fail started to be prosecuted as treason. There were a lot of convictions, a fair number of executions, and the rats seemed to be ratting each other out pretty regularly. Money was coming back into the markets with public trust in the institutions, and for most people were divided. A rich source of information would explain a lot about the excessive prosecutions. Amanda was interested.
Thank you so much for that, Dan. We have a lot of talking dead people so far. So I'm a little concerned about that.